Mom sided with stepdad and his kids, kicked me out, but they forgot that I own the house. Now it's time to take it back. It never occurred to me, 35M, that my father's meticulous estate planning would ultimately cause our family to fall apart. There's a lot to digest here, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the whole picture, so let me start at the beginning. One of the big tech businesses in Seattle employs me as a senior software architect. My dad always had this kind of job in mind for me. Technology is the future, he would exclaim proudly after I was accepted to UW's computer science program. He had a profitable construction business and wasn't a techie, but he had a remarkable knack for predicting trends. Beginning with the recession of the late 1980s, Dad started his construction business from the ground up throughout some of the most difficult periods in the industry. He took on projects that other contractors wouldn't take on, using only a pickup truck and his tools. Back then, Mom told me, they lived in a small apartment and were frugal, but Dad had this unwavering faith in his vision. He would frequently remark, "The key is to build relationships, not just buildings." That way of thinking got him through his difficult early years. Dad's business was unique because of the way he treated both customers and staff. Even if it meant losing some bids to rivals who made exaggerated deadline promises, he was a firm believer in open pricing and truthful schedules. First, establish trust, he would advise. He was correct when he said, "The profits will follow." His business, which was renowned for taking on intricate restoration projects requiring both technical expertise and historical sensitivity, rose to prominence in the Seattle area by the mid-1990s. Because of the devotion he had developed with his clients and staff, Dad's business survived the 2008 financial crisis, when many construction companies were failing. He didn't fire a single employee during that period. Rather, he reduced his personal income to zero and took out a second mortgage on his cherished Mustang. I learned more about leadership from watching him handle that issue than I could have from any management course. "Your employees are your extended family," he told me. "You take care of them, they'll take care of your business." I didn't realize at the time how much his managerial approach affected my own career. Many of his ideas were put to use when I was promoted to team lead at my software business. I established thorough documentation procedures for our code, much as he had kept thorough project logs for every building site. I was able to lead my development team through challenging project deadlines thanks to his attention on fostering good relationships. I met Emily, 34F, at a hackathon in my junior year. She assisted in planning the event while pursuing her studies in business administration. Despite my lack of sleep, energy drink addiction, and likely messy appearance, she somehow found my love of code charming. From the first time he laid eyes on her, Dad fell in love. He told me, "She grounds you." Following their first meal together. "Don't let this one get away." After college, Dad even assisted Emily in launching her own marketing firm. He introduced her to his network of local company owners, showed her how he drafted his contracts, and shared his business objectives with her. He would tell us, "Success isn't just about what you know. It's about helping others succeed too." Dad was always imparting his expertise and educating. Those formative years were unique. Emily and I would always make the drive to my parents' house on Sundays to have dinner. We would all sit on the back deck that Dad had constructed and chat about everything and nothing while he lit the grill. Even though he couldn't understand the majority of the technical details of my most recent work, he would still ask in-depth inquiries. Mom used to say, "There they go again with the computer talk," with a loving eye roll. Dad's pride and joy was the house itself. He purchased it with the proceeds from his first significant construction job in the 1990s, which was a historic restoration project that made his business famous. In one of Seattle's older neighborhoods, this lovely craftsman-style home features a wraparound porch and a garage that he transformed into the most well-organized workshop you've ever seen. Labeled and placed with almost fanatical precision, each tool has its place. Dad handled the house as though it were a living example of his skill. Every renovation was meticulously organized and recorded. Every repair, improvement and paint job was documented in a thorough spreadsheet that he maintained. "A house is like a living thing," he would say as he demonstrated for me how to clean the gutters or inspect the foundation. He maintained a maintenance regimen that included everything from checking the roof after winter storms to changing air filters. Neglect the little things, and they become big problems. In addition to being his haven, the workshop served as a classroom where he taught me about subjects other than tools. In addition to adding unique storage options and a workbench he made especially for teaching me woodworking, he had completely renovated the garage himself. He would say, "Every piece of wood has its own story," as we were working. The pegboard wall with delineated shapes for each tool wasn't just about organization. It was his method of teaching me that everything has a place and a purpose. Our job is to help tell that story. Our family held weekends in high regard. In that garage, Dad and I would work on his 1967 Mustang for hours on end. When I was 12, Dad had purchased it for restoration, claiming it would be a project that would strengthen our bond as father and son. That vehicle turned into a life lessons classroom. His advice, which I still abide by now, was straightforward. Always use the right tool for the job. Or shortcuts look tempting, but they'll cost you in the long run. Although Dad might have completed the Mustang project in 1 year if he had so desired, it took 3 years. However, he was more interested in the process than the final destination. I learned everything from project management to fundamental mechanics from him. We took pictures of every component we changed, recorded each step and maintained thorough logs of our development. This isn't just about fixing a car, he would affirm. It's about learning how to break down big problems into manageable pieces. I found that lesson to be really helpful in my profession as a software developer. Emily and I purchased a small home around 20 minutes from my parents' house after we were married. Although Dad insisted that we take out the mortgage in our names, Dad assisted us with the down payment. You need to build your own credit history, he clarified. It's about standing on your own feet. He taught me how to install ceiling fans and fix drywall as he worked on our renovations on the weekends. He was preparing me for the responsibilities of home ownership even back then. At this time, my career was really taking off. I'd just received a promotion to team lead, overseeing a team that was creating cloud infrastructure solutions. I enjoyed every second of it. Even if the hours were long and the strain was great. During my lunch breaks, Dad would frequently call to check in, without discussing anything specific. He was aware of the demands of managing a group and overseeing the work of others. Remember to delegate, he would say. You can't do everything yourself, just like I can't build a house alone. When Dad initially stated feeling exhausted all the time, we were discussing the possibility of starting a family. He continued to put off seeing a doctor, despite Mom's insistence. Just working too hard, he would dismiss our worries. He was working on his largest project to date, a multi-million-dollar development deal that would have established his business for the ensuing 10 years. In retrospect, I regret not pressing harder and insisting on those examinations sooner. Perhaps things might have turned out differently. At the time, the business was expanding quickly. Dad was discussing growing into historical restoration projects in the Pacific Northwest and had recently launched a second office in Portland. He has established a reputation for updating the infrastructure of historic structures without sacrificing their character. He would tell his clients, it's about embracing the future while respecting the past. Everything he accomplished, including his personal and professional life, was impacted by his love of preservation. The Mustang was the subject of our last meaningful discussion. He was discussing taking it to car shows now that we had completed the restoration. When he remarked, we should sign up for the Pacific Northwest Classic, his eyes glowed like a child's. He continued to plan for the future until the very end, saying, show these youngsters what a real muscle car looks like. It began like any other morning until everything changed. When Mom called, my phone buzzed while I was in an early meeting. We were in the midst of an important project conversation, so I nearly didn't respond. But I had to go out and take it for some reason. Mom was crying so hard she was having trouble speaking. Dad had passed out on a construction site. He had left by the time I arrived at the hospital. According to the physicians, it was a sudden and severe heart attack. He was only 58. The weeks following Dad's passing were a haze of mourning and bureaucracy. The funeral was crowded. Dad's business and community involvement had impacted countless people. Suppliers, contractors, and even rival businesses came to show their support. Everybody shared a story about how Dad had supported them, given them advice, or simply been there for them when they needed someone to confide in. One old craftsman told me how, despite being unable to work during a protracted illness, Dad had managed to keep him on the payroll. Your father understood that business was about people first, he stated. The workers of the company were heartbroken. Many of them had known Dad for decades, and they told me things I had never heard before, like how he had paid for the college textbooks of one foreman's daughter, assisted another through a divorce, or remained late to teach apprentices the nuances of historical restoration. With pictures and handwritten remarks from both clients and employees, the workplace conference room was transformed into an unofficial monument. We were all surprised by how well Dad had prepared for everything. His attorney, Mr. Anderson, summoned us in for a meeting a week following the funeral. He took out this enormous accordion file that read Family Security Protocol and was neatly handwritten by Dad. Dozens of carefully arranged papers with comprehensive instructions for various areas of his land were found within. I was given a 3-day tour of Dad's estate paperwork by Mr. Anderson. Each color-coded container had personal notes outlining his decisions in addition to legal paperwork. "I've never seen an estate plan this thoroughly in my 35 years of practice," Mr. Anderson remarked. Dad had even included a 5-year business transition plan with backup plans for various circumstances. After that, Mom began going to her church's bereavement support group. She first met Steve, 58M, there. Initially, she only mentioned him in passing. Steve suggested this great book about healing. Or, Steve said it's normal to feel this way. He was one of the group facilitators and had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. Even if it seemed a little early, I was happy that she was receiving support. I was reminded by Emily that everyone experiences grief in a unique way. Every Tuesday night, the church grief support group met. Before long, Mom was attending church functions with Steve more often. After services, coffee gatherings became lunch meetings, which in turn became dinner dates. Our family friends began to worry about how quickly their friendship was developing. At a family get-together, my Aunt Jane pulled me aside because she was concerned that Mom was hurrying into things to make up for Dad's absence. Mom's changes became more apparent. Her haircut changed, she started dressing differently, and she even threw out the garden that Dad had helped her create. Every time I questioned these changes, she would respond, "It's time for a fresh start." Dad was hardly ever mentioned by the woman who used to spend hours narrating her life with him. It went more quickly than any of us had anticipated. Mom announced that Steve was moving in 6 months after Dad's death. James, 30M, and Lisa, 32F, his own grown children, felt it would be beneficial to bring life back into the house. I made an effort to be sympathetic, but it seemed like she was in a rush to replace everything Dad had constructed. "I'm at a crossroads right now. How can I preserve Dad's legacy without jeopardizing Mom's chances for happiness?" Emily advises me to strike a balance, but I can't help but think of Dad's letter. "Son, preserve those memories. First update. I apologize for the wait for the update and appreciate all of the advice you gave on my previous article. 3 months have passed since my last post, and things have become much worse. Steve's domineering demeanor used to bother me, but now he acts as though he owns the house my dad left me. Steve made the decision to begin a significant restoration project last month without even asking my permission. The built-in bookshelves my dad had made for the living room were being torn up by contractors when I visited one weekend. As if he owned the building, Steve was watching over them and directing them to just throw all this old wood in the dumpster. These were the final project Dad and I worked on together before he became ill, so they were more than just shelves. He responded angrily when I approached him. He said, "Look, son," with a condescending emphasis on the pronoun. "This house needs to be brought into the 21st century. Your father's taste was, well, dated. We're doing you a favor by increasing the property value." I reminded him that any modifications required my consent legally. Mom obviously agreed with him, but he simply chuckled and added, "Your mother and I live here. We don't need permission to improve our home." "Steve knows about these things," she acknowledged. "He's just trying to help." The woman who formerly loved those bookshelves and used to place her collection of antique teacups on them for Christmas now acts as though they were just taking up room. I showed her Dad's thorough house maintenance plans, but she disregarded them as dwelling in the past. Additionally, the relationship with Steve's children has deteriorated. James has taken over Dad's workshop and transformed it into a CrossFit facility. While I was on a business trip, he held a garage sale and sold the majority of Dad's tools. By repainting rooms and installing modern vinyl planks in place of Dad's meticulously refinished hardwood floors, Lisa is treating the space as though it were her own personal design project. One evening after dinner, Steve grabbed me aside and said, "Since we're paying to live here, we should have our names on the deed. It's only fair." I had to explain him that they don't pay a mortgage because Dad's planning has paid for the house in full. They don't even cover their rent. All maintenance expenses, insurance, and property taxes are paid for by me. Emily recommended that we stop making weekly visits. Now that Emma is here, she is correct, no one benefits from the stress in that household. However, taking a back seat has only made Steve more confident. He began sending me bills for improvements that I never approved, and he began making them more regularly. I should be more sympathetic of Mom's new life, according to Mom's sister, who called me recently. I attempted to explain Dad's intentions and my legal obligations, but she simply accused me of being trapped in the past. "Steve makes her happy. Why can't you just let them make the house their own?" she asked. I found out this week that the growth markers that recorded my height from the ages of 3 to 18 had been removed from the kitchen door frame. Every birthday, Dad would measure me and write the date next to each mark. "It's just an old door frame. We can't keep every piece of wood just because your father touched it," Mom remarked when I confronted her about it. I now spend more time sitting in Dad's old chair, the only piece of furniture I was able to keep, in my own garage. Mr. Anderson advises me to begin considering long-term fixes. Legally, the house belongs to me, but I will eventually have to make some difficult choices regarding its destiny. When does being the bad guy become more important than preserving your father's legacy? And when your whole family opposes you, how do you defend the moral high ground? Update 2. I appreciate all of your advice regarding my previous post. The situation has reached a breaking point and I've finally made a choice that will most likely alter everything. I spoke with my financial advisor about the house situation last week. We may make a sizable rental income, enough to cover Emma's future college fund, because nearby property values have risen by 40% in the last 3 years. I discovered at the discussion that I had been so preoccupied with the sentimental elements that I had failed to take into account the financial ramifications of allowing Mom and Steve to live rent-free. Everything went haywire when I brought this up to Mom in our weekly conversation. She yelled into the phone, "You can't do this to us. This is where we call home. Steve has worked really hard on it." She refused to listen when I tried to explain that I was only considering my choices. She continued to talk about all the enhancements they had made, utterly disregarding the fact that I had never given my approval for these changes. An hour later, Steve called. He was upset, and his tone was different from his usual arrogant demeanor. "Listen here," he announced. "In this house, we have established a life. Because you're missing your father, you can't just walk in and ruin everything." He interrupted me when I attempted to explain the financial issues, stating that they now had sweat equity in the property. I reminded him that the house belonged to me legally. "There's a reason why Dad left it to me." "Your father isn't here anymore," he replied. "You must consider the living." I talked to Emily about it and talked to Mr. Anderson about it before deciding on it the following day. When I arrived at the house, Mom and Steve were working on yet another remodeling job. In the dining room, they had begun ripping out the original crown molding, which Dad had specifically milled to blend in with the house's antique style. That image made me more determined. "They have 2 weeks to find another place to live," I told them. Mom burst into tears at once, accusing me of being callous and harsh. Steve tried to scare me by arguing with me about my inability to throw them out on the street. He began enumerating all of their local ties, including his place of employment, their church, and their neighborhood pals. When faced with challenging circumstances, I maintained my composure and firmness, as my father had taught me. I declared, "This is my property. Dad left it to me for a reason, and I'm exercising my legal right as the owner." Steve's cheeks flushed, and he began to enumerate all the money they had spent on upgrades. I informed him that the historical value of the property had actually been diminished by these unapproved alterations. When Lisa returned home and joined the debate, things became worse. Mom utilized her pregnancy as emotional leverage right away. "How are you able to treat your stepsister in this way? She will give birth to a child." Although Lisa's pregnancy is significant to them, I had to tell them that it does not affect my property rights and that she is not my stepsister. There has been an ongoing assault of emotional manipulation ever since. Mom's whole family has banded together to oppose me. Her sister called, sobbing, and said their parents wanted to make sure Mom was safe. Messages regarding the challenging rental market were left by Steve's brother, a local real estate agent. Long messages on Christian ideals and family loyalty are even coming from distant cousins who I hardly know. Dealing with family friends who have known me since my early years is the most difficult. People who grew up with me now tell me how unhappy they are with my decisions, and every call seems like another tiny betrayal. Some even claim that I'm damaging Dad's standing in the neighborhood. The problem is that this has nothing to do with cruelty or profit. This is about honoring Dad's desires and preserving the things he created. It has been agonizing enough to see them methodically destroy all traces of him. The house was his legacy. I've paid for all of their expenses, allowed them to live rent-free for years, and put up with their unapproved changes. Eventually, enough is enough. They have 2 weeks to come up with new plans. I'm refusing to give in to Mom's constant demands for more time. Mr. Anderson claims that the law is entirely on my side and that I have been more than giving. He is assisting me with creating official paperwork for the notice to vacate, ensuring that everything is accurately documented. I realize that this makes me appear to be the villain in everyone else's tale, but sometimes standing up for what's right requires making difficult choices, even when others disagree. I learned that from my dad. Third update. We appreciate everyone's help at this trying time. Things have come to an unavoidable end, therefore this will likely be my last update. I assigned Mom and Steve a 2-week deadline, but it's already passed. The past 2 weeks have been the longest of my life. They have been filled with guilt-tripping, continual emotional manipulation, and progressively frantic attempts to get me to change my mind. Mom did everything she could. Every day she called, oscillating between fury and tears. She would say, "I changed your diapers," one day. "I gave up everything for you," she would yell the next day. Steve also changed strategies, trying to negotiate instead of using intimidation. He recommended establishing a formal lease and offered to begin paying rent. I couldn't rely on them to uphold whatever agreements we made though, given what they had done to Dad's house. When I got to the house, there were people gathering on the front lawn 3 days prior to the deadline. Mom had enlisted the help of friends from church, family, and even some of Dad's former business partners. They had prepared statements about moral commitments and family responsibilities as part of what amounted to an intervention. I listened to people criticize me for being a bad son for 2 hours. The topic of honoring your parents was discussed by Mom's pastor. Dad's old secretary remembered his generosity with tears in her eyes. My elementary school teacher even came to remind me of the morals my father had attempted to teach me. The hardest part was when Lisa got up and talked about how stress could hurt her unborn child while covering her pregnant abdomen with her hands. While Mom was crying next to her, a few of the church women were glaring at me. It was an expert lesson in manipulating emotions. But during this ambush, an unexpected event occurred. I had a strange sense of serenity as I sat there listening to everyone talk about Dad, people who hadn't even been to his funeral suddenly professing to know what he would have wanted. Dad used to say, "Stand your ground when you know you're right." And I could almost hear his voice in my thoughts. I got to my feet and spoke to the group. I described how Dad planned everything carefully to ensure his family's future and how he had constructed this house by hand. I showed them pictures of Steve's unapproved modifications, including the historical elements he ruined and the fine craftsmanship he removed and replaced with flimsy modern fixtures. After that, I presented them with a letter from Dad outlining his reasons for leaving everything to me. Some of the elder business associates nodded as I read his remarks about trust, accountability, and preserving his legacy. They understood because they'd known Dad, really knew him. Shortly thereafter, the group scattered. While some looked disapproving, the righteous wrath had subsided, and others gently apologized as they walked away. Without saying another word, Mom and Steve returned inside. I showed there with Mr. Anderson and a locksmith on the morning of the deadline. Although they weren't required, I had hired a security company to be on hand just in case. The house was deserted. The remainder of their possessions were packed into Steve's truck. Steve couldn't help but give me a last poke, but Mom refused to look at me. As he assisted Lisa into his pickup, he asked, "You're happy with yourself? Your father would be so proud of how you've treated your mother." I didn't answer. Dad would have known. I know he had prepared for this possibility. What other reason might he have had for being so explicit in his will? I strolled about the home after they had left. I had underestimated the extent of the harm. Builder-grade materials had been used to replace the original fittings. Dad had painted over or taken out his handcrafted woodwork. We had spent so many weekends at the workshop, and it had changed completely. I have no intention of pursuing damages, but Mr. Anderson documented everything for any legal considerations. I simply want to put this chapter behind me and concentrate on fixing what can be fixed. Some of Dad's old craftsman friends have already been contacted, and they are eager to assist in rebuilding the features that were taken out. For now, Mom is staying with her sister. The majority of my relatives have stopped talking to me altogether, however some sometimes call to chastise me. On social media, Steve's children continue to share heartbreaking updates about their poor mother being thrown out of her home, but fewer people are responding to each post. Through it all, Emily has been my pillar of support. She reminds me of Dad's letter whenever I begin to doubt myself, expressing his faith in my ability to make the right choices. I will eventually tell Emma about her grandfather and the heritage he attempted to preserve, but she is too little to comprehend what is occurring right now. To restore the house to its original state, I'm collaborating with a restoration professional. We can preserve the spirit of what Dad made, but it won't be perfect. Some things can't be reversed. First, the workshop will be restored. The same place where I learned from my father is where I want my daughter to study. Being the villain in someone else's tale is sometimes the price of doing the right thing. I may never be able to rebuild the relationships I lost, but I can live with the fact that I preserved what my father trusted me with. As Dad used to say, integrity is about doing the right thing, even when it hurts, and not about taking the easy route. I believe he would comprehend. My last update will be this one. I appreciate everyone's support along this journey. After my wife's betrayal with my business partner, I guard my daughter's future while they try to reinsert themselves in our lives. My ex-wife Kathy, 38, and I, 38, Had been together for 19 years and married for 16. We also had a 14-year-old daughter together. However, she left approximately 6 months ago to be with my previous work partner. To be more specific, my ex-work partner, as he sold his shares and left the company once I uncovered the affair. Leon, the guy I used to run the firm with, was a co-worker and a close friend. We agreed to quit our jobs and form a company together. We'd been working together for 5 years, and he'd had an affair with my wife for 3 of them. I learned about it approximately 6 months ago when I discovered some text messages on my wife's phone. When I challenged her about it, she didn't even try to dispute it and instead accepted everything. She told me she was sick and tired of hiding things and simply wanted to leave. I was saddened since I had no notion she was unhappy in our marriage, and I was willing to do anything to change that. So on the day I confronted her, when she announced she was leaving, I assured her we could still make it work. That was very stupid of me, but I was desperate. She simply became irritated with me and stated that the only reason she married me in the first place was because she was pregnant and didn't want to be alone. She'd tried to love me for 16 years, but it hadn't worked. She was not going to let me stop her now that she had found someone she truly loved. She explained that now that I knew about the affair, her secret had been revealed, and I had to swallow it and move on. I was heartbroken, especially for the sake of our daughter, but she didn't even hesitate to leave. She filed for divorce, and the petition was quite simple. She simply wanted to leave and did not demand a settlement or alimony from me. The asset distribution was fairly balanced. We concluded the divorce after a few months. After a while, I knew that what had transpired would prevent me from making it work with her. After we filed for divorce, I faced Leon, who just apologized, claiming he had wanted to tell me about the affair for a long time but didn't know how. Within a few weeks, he quit and informed me that he and Kathy would be moving away to avoid causing further trouble for me. Kathy had been offered a fantastic job in Boston, and his cousin lived there, so he could work alongside him instead. He sent all of this in an email, and we never spoke again. The last time I saw Kathy was 2 months ago, on the day our divorce was finalized. Since then, I have not heard from one of them. My kid and I were going through a difficult time, but we were getting by. At least I still had my business to manage, which kept me busy since I wanted to provide my daughter the future she deserved. However, Kathy returned about a week ago and I'm still not sure if my daughter and I did the right thing. So around a week ago, at 11 p.m., someone began furiously ringing our doorbell and knocking. My daughter had already gone to bed and I was finishing up some work in my office when it happened. We hurried to the door to check and through the glass, we saw Kathy. My daughter urged me not to open the door because she was furious with her mother. Despite having partial custody, Kathy has made little effort to communicate with our daughter and the fact that she cheated does not sit well with her either. Their relationship is tight right now, but I knew if Kathy was at my house at such a late hour, it had to be urgent, so I opened the door and allowed her in. Instead of coming in, she started ranting at me from the doorstep, threatening to sue me. She insisted on taking this to court so she could receive everything she was owed since she couldn't believe I had chosen to punish her so harshly. For the first few seconds, I had no understanding what she was saying, and I had to urge her to slow down and elucidate since I was so perplexed. She was still upset and said there was no need for me to pretend I didn't know because she was certain I had withheld Leon's true character from her to punish her for cheating. Then she pulled up her shirt sleeve and showed me a place on her arm covered in a band-aid. I concluded Leon must have done something, which surprised me because we had worked together for several years and he had never lost his cool in front of me. Kathy told me that they had been arguing for the past few weeks, ever since they moved to Boston. Nothing had remained the same since their move. She assumed it was because Leon was still adjusting to his new life, but after a month there, he was acting as if everything was Kathy's fault. He apparently kept accusing her of wrecking his life because he had to abandon the business he had fought so hard to build. Now he had to work with his cousin, who was always undermining him, and he blamed Kathy for everything. She was the one who told me about the affair before he was ready, and now he had to relocate to Boston for her work, so he couldn't compete for the business either. They'd been arguing every night, and the night before she arrived, he got incredibly angry and threw a vase at her. She attempted to dodge it, but it still struck her arm, causing a cut. Until that point, he had only verbally abused her, but this time it had gone too far, and she had left the house that night to take the next flight here to tell me about it. She told me that Leon had not even tried to contact her or apologize after she departed. She said I was to blame for this because she believed I was aware of his violent behavior and had concealed it from her in order to punish her. She thought it was unfair of me to do so, especially because she believed she had done me a favor by not fighting for anything during the divorce. I couldn't even get her back and secure her safety. It was all pretty foolish because, as I already stated, I had worked with Leon for a long time and knew him well, but just on a professional level. In the office, he was much different. I had never dated him and had only met the ladies he had previously dated, so there was no way I could have known about this side of him. Her charges that I had hidden everything on purpose made no sense to me, and I was furious that she was acting as if I owed her something. I attempted to explain to her that I had no idea about all of this and that I was deeply sorry that it was happening to her, but it was ultimately her fault. She could threaten me with litigation all she wanted, but she understood it wasn't my fault. She continued to argue, stating that I knew everything and that she would fight for everything she didn't get during our divorce. My daughter had been waiting at the door the entire time, and I had almost completely forgotten about her since I was so preoccupied with the fight. When we started talking in circles, she interrupted Kathy and told her to go. I was astonished since I didn't expect her to interrupt, and I believe Kathy was caught off guard. Kathy then advised my daughter to stop up and keep out of it because she was too little to understand what was happening. She told my daughter to go to bed, but she refused. She held firm and stated that Kathy had no right to speak to me in this manner, especially given what she had put me through. My daughter reminded Kathy that I had been sad for the past few months, ever since I discovered her infidelity. Kathy, the cruel and heartless monster that she was, simply carried on with her life. She then pointed out that Kathy had neglected to visit her own daughter or stay in touch since she was preoccupied with Leon and her new life. My daughter informed Kathy that she had failed to be a good wife and mother, thus she had no business acting like a victim in a scenario she had made for herself. My daughter is only 14, but seeing her express those things made me realize how much she had matured since the divorce. Kathy was completely speechless and unable to respond to our daughter's statements. Finally, my daughter informed Kathy that now that she had gone and was living with Leon, she would have to cope with whatever she was going through on her own because we were no longer her family. Kathy had dug her own grave, and now she had to lie in it. Which was exactly what she deserved for screwing people over. After saying this, my daughter slammed the door in Kathy's face and returned to her room. I could hear Kathy crying outside the door, but I didn't bother checking on her because I didn't think it was necessary given our recent chat. I too went back to bed, trying not to think about the issue for the following few days while keeping myself busy at work. I was quite proud of my daughter for standing up for me and not allowing me to appear weak in front of Kathy. Things were going well after that visit, but 3 days ago Kathy showed up again, this time with a lawyer, demanding complete custody of our kid. Fortunately, our daughter was out with a couple of friends when she came over in the evening, so I haven't told her anything about it yet. I was furious when Kathy informed me that after our daughter spoke with her the last time we met, she decided she would no longer allow our daughter to live with me. She informed me that the actual reason she hadn't tried to contact our daughter after I found out about the affair was that she didn't want to become involved in a lengthy custody battle that would disturb my life much more than she already had. This, she claimed, was why she wanted to depart discreetly and hadn't attempted to contact our daughter. She thought it would have made matters worse because I was furious about the situation. So she was basically trying to tell me that she did all of this for my sake, not just to get out of having any responsibilities. I was clearly not buying it, and I informed her that the only reason she didn't fight for anything during the divorce, let alone custody of our kid, was that she wanted to leave swiftly and start a new life with Leon. This had nothing to do with me, as she tried to make it seem, therefore I didn't need to feel sorry for her. However, she stated that she no longer cared about that since she now desired full custody of our daughter and was determined to ensure that she received it. She insisted that she would not let me ruin my daughter's opinion of her by telling her ridiculous stories and training her to disrespect her mother. Kathy said that during our last meeting, our daughter was extremely disrespectful to her, and that I encouraged this conduct. She now knew what to do and had returned to inform me that she was taking this to court. I told her to be my guest and closed the door because I didn't want to waste any more time talking to her. However, I began to question whether she had a point. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't sure to be honest, so I felt bad about not reprimanding my daughter when she was rude to her mother. Update 1. I've determined that I have nothing to be sorry for. My daughter did the correct thing in sticking up for me, and the comments made me understand how silly I was. She cheated on me, so I don't think I should feel sorrow or regret for what happened to her. Many people in the comments urged me to speak with my daughter first since it would be unfair for her to be caught off guard if Kathy applies for full custody after our last meeting. So I told my kid about it yesterday. I didn't want to withhold anything from her. She has already demonstrated to me that she is grown enough to handle these situations, and I feel horrible that she had to mature overnight. At least now, I can help her prepare for the future. So yet, we haven't heard from Kathy, but we expect to shortly. Our daughter is 14, which means she can be considered in court if the situation escalates. If we can reach an agreement during mediation, that would be ideal, but just in case, I have confirmed that she actually wants to stay with me. She has made it clearly plain that she doesn't want anything to do with Kathy. Not just now anyhow. She told me that in the future, she would contemplate reuniting with Kathy and restoring their connection, but for the time being, everything is too fresh. She clearly blames her mother for splitting up the family, and I can't say anything because it's technically correct. I don't want to be the type of father who turns his child against his ex-partner for petty reasons, but in this case, I don't think there is much I can do. Kathy has done a fantastic job alienating our daughter, who now prefers to keep her distance from her own mother. They were fairly close before the affair came to light, so this is a significant departure from what they were both used to. Kathy is clearly irritated that my daughter is on my side, as she has always attempted to be closer to her. Speaking of which, several of you wanted to know who informed our daughter about the affair. It was Kathy, not me. She confessed in an email to our daughter a few days after she moved out, without first asking if I wanted to be involved. My kid was really unhappy when she found out, but she still wanted to speak with her mother just once. However, Kathy refused. When I tried to contact Kathy to let her know our daughter wanted to talk, she refused because she was too preoccupied with the divorce process. She also didn't think it was proper to discuss it, so she expressed what she wanted to say in that email and had nothing else to add. I attempted to persuade her to speak with our daughter only once because she appeared to have a lot of questions. However, Kathy remained adamant about her decision. After that, she stopped speaking to us entirely, and my daughter's perception of her mother shifted dramatically. Kathy holding me responsible for that does not seem fair to me. Anyway, I've spoken with my lawyer and we're going to deal with this. Update 2. Kathy ultimately served me with the notice for full custody a few days ago, and my lawyer and I responded by fighting it right away. We are scheduled to meet with the court-appointed mediator tomorrow, but Leon called me today. I was shocked to see his name on my phone because we didn't have much to chat about, but I answered the call. As soon as I did, he asked me to return Kathy to him. He claimed he'd been trying to reach her for a few days and knew she'd been with me or spoken to me, so he wanted me to tell her where she was. I told him I had no idea where she was residing, but I had spoken with her in the last several days and she was here to battle for custody of our kid. To be clear, I did not do this to help Leon, but I hoped that if Leon stopped by and chatted with Kathy, he might alter her mind and convince her to return. If I was lucky, he might even get her to sign over her rights to our daughter. With that in mind, I told him everything and added that she was upset since he had not contacted her after she left that night. I urged that if he wanted her back, he should act immediately. The poor guy had no suspicions and had no idea he was being exploited, which worked out perfectly for me. I just hope Kathy still wants to make it work with him. When he comes back, she might accompany him. I also discussed this idea with my lawyer, who confirmed that what I did was correct. Even though the odds are already in our favor, it doesn't hurt to save time and energy by resolving this before going to court. Update 3. Kathy and I met for our first mediation session 2 days ago and it obviously did not go well. She disagreed with all of our views and said it was all a waste of time before ending the session after half an hour. After she left, I returned home after picking up my kid from school. When we returned, Leon was waiting for us at our door. The poor guy appeared to be in a dreadful state, and I can only imagine how he must be feeling after spending a few months with Kathy. I told him he needed to leave because my daughter and I had just returned home and wanted to rest. We didn't have time to cope with his turmoil, and I had already helped him in whatever way I could. I couldn't go out of my way to aid the man who had been having an affair with my wife, but he actually broke down, claiming that after their last battle, she hadn't even responded to any of his texts, and he had no idea where to seek for her. I informed him, as I had before, that I still didn't know where she lived and that I couldn't help him. He just slumped down on the front steps, crying and holding his head in his hands. At that moment I began to become upset since this guy and Kathy had literally ruined my life and now he felt comfortable enough to seek my assistance in finding her so they could settle things. I ordered my daughter to go inside so I could deal with this, and after she was inside, I told Leon he needed to leave because I was done with both of them for good. For good measure, I gave him Kathy's parents' contact information and told him to call them if he couldn't reach her, but he had to leave us alone immediately. I told him that he had damaged both mine and Kathy's lives. He tried to apologize, saying he didn't mean to harm me, but he'd fallen in love with her and couldn't stop himself. I didn't want to hear it, so I said nothing, and he departed. I'm constantly exhausted and bewildered, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life right now. I sincerely hope and pray that Leon and Kathy can make things right for my sake, if not theirs, because if they do, they will most likely leave me and my kid alone, and I will finally be able to move on with my life. At this point, I'm not sure what's going on or how I should feel about anything. I'm numb for the most part and can't wait for this to be over. Update 4. Kathy stopped our mediation sessions a few days ago, saying she wanted to take our case to court. That would not end well for her, as we all knew, but it appears she was no longer in denial. Anyway, she came to see me a few hours ago with Leon. I suppose they were able to patch things up. I didn't invite them in since my daughter was home and unwell, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. I ordered them to wait for me at a nearby cafe, called my mother to take care of my daughter, and then went to the cafe to hash things out. When I arrived, Kathy and Leon apologized for everything they had put me through. Again, I had to inform them that this no longer mattered to me. I really wanted them to move on and explain why they had called me there. I didn't want to waste my time with insincere apologies, so they stopped skirting the issue and informed me that they recognized they had made a mistake by screwing me over and that they were really unhappy in Boston. Kathy missed our daughter, while Leon missed being his own boss. Kathy now wanted me to agree to send our daughter to see her every weekend, or every other weekend, because she didn't want to give up her current life. Leon's demands were even more outrageous. He wanted to return as a partner in the company and open a branch in Boston. The finest part of all was that they expected me to make a decision within a few days. Kathy's bosses had advised her that if she wanted to keep her job, she needed to return because she could no longer work from home. Even if I wanted to tell them I would think about it, I didn't have the option. That's why I ended up telling them I couldn't agree to any of it. Leon had already quit and sold his shares, which I had on paper, so I was not going to hire him again because I didn't trust him at all. Kathy's proposal was unreasonable because our daughter did not deserve to go back and forth every other weekend simply to see her mother. She should have considered these things before moving to Boston. This is absolutely not my fault. They began to dispute with me, saying they were willing to compromise since they did not want to fight this in court. I told them that the thought of fighting for what they wanted in court and actually winning was ridiculous. They only wanted to bargain with me in person because they believed they could manipulate me. Unfortunately, I was not weak or stupid enough to believe any of this. The only reason I'd come to meet them was to put an end to this. That actually silenced them, since they realized they'd never win if this went to court. I told them that the most I could do for them, or Kathy in particular, was to talk to our daughter and get her to meet Kathy whenever she came to visit. Aside from that, I wasn't doing anything, so they could take or leave it. I wasn't going to waste any more of my time arguing with them. Kathy seemed desperate, so she consented quickly, and I left. I will talk to my daughter when she feels better, but I will not compel her to do anything she does not want to do. If she decides she doesn't want to see her mother again, that is her choice. I am not going to convince her. Update 5. Hello, a few months have gone by. In my last update, I stated that I would not push my daughter to meet her mother if she did not wish to. I next spoke with my daughter, telling her what I had said to Kathy. She stated that she wanted some time to consider things over, so I expressed this to Kathy a few months back. Since then, we have not communicated. I'm not sure if she and Leon have settled their differences. I don't care. According to what I know, they are still together and living in Boston. Good for them, I suppose. At least they've left me alone, so I can now start to move on. That's exactly what I'm doing. The best revenge is to live well, therefore I'm focusing on working and growing my kid to be a wonderful human being, unlike her mother. Basically, I hope I am successful in doing so. After refusing to babysit my stepsister's kids, my dad threatened to cut me off, leading to uncovered family secrets and strained ties. I'm Sophia, 28F, and I've been dealing with some family trouble recently. My parents split when I was 10, and it was not a good experience. My mother moved out, and I lived with my father for several years. It was only the two of us. We were close, and I assumed we told each other everything, but as I got older, I realized there were many things my father withheld from me. When I was 16, my father introduced me to Linda, 50F. They had been dating for a time without informing me. I was hurt that he kept this a secret, but I attempted to be supportive. A few months later, they married, and Linda moved in with her daughter, Emma, 25F. The transition was difficult. I went from being an only kid to suddenly having a stepsister. Emma and I never really clicked. She was lively and outgoing, whereas I was more reserved. We were courteous to one another, but we never became close friends or anything like that. At 18, I moved out for college, relieved to get some space from my new family. I focused on my academics and met new people. After graduating, I found a job in the same city and decided to stay. I'd go to see my father and Linda on holidays, but that was about it. Emma and I scarcely communicated, just exchanging birthday texts and attending family dinners when I was in town. Fast forward to today. Emma recently came to my city with her 27-year-old husband Jake, and their two children, Liam, 4M, and Ava, 2F. Jake accepted a new position at a technology startup, so they relocated here. Emma does not work. She is a stay-at-home mom. When they first moved, my father called and requested me to assist them settle in. I was not delighted about it, but I agreed. I took them around the city, helped them select a suitable neighborhood, and even helped with part of the relocation. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. Emma began visiting my flat every evening with her children about a week after they relocated. She would ask me to look after them for an hour or two while she went errands. I initially accepted because I wanted to be nice, but it soon became a daily occurrence. I worked from home as a graphic designer, and while I was finished with work by the time she took the kids off, I value my alone time in the evening. I utilize that time to relax, work on personal projects, or socialize with friends. The kids are okay, but I'm not really a kid person. I don't know how to keep children entertained, and being around them always makes me nervous. I reminded Emma several times that she needed to hire a babysitter, but she always had an excuse. "It's just for today," she'd remark. "I'm still getting used to the city." I started to suspect she was taking advantage of me. Last Friday, I had planned to go out with my pals. We were celebrating my best friend's promotion, which I'd been looking forward to all week. I told Emma in the morning that I would be unable to watch the kids that evening. She said okay, and I assumed that was all. But at 6 p.m., just as I was about to leave, Emma arrived at my door with Liam and Ava. Before I could say anything, she handed me the kids and drove away. I tried calling her, but she did not answer. I even called Jake, but he did not respond. I had to postpone my plans and stay at home with the kids. I was infuriated. Emma had ruined my plans before, but this was the first time she fully ignored my refusal to babysit. I was trapped with the kids until 9 p.m., when Emma arrived to pick them up. When she arrived, I challenged her regarding her behavior. She pretended it was no big deal and claimed she had an emergency. When I pressed her for information, she was unclear and evasive. I warned her that this could not happen again and that she needed to get a proper babysitter. Emma became enraged and stated I was being selfish, and that families should assist one another out. That is when I lost my temper. I told her that we were not truly relatives. I explained that just because our parents married doesn't mean we had to be close. I informed her that we had scarcely spoken in years before she moved here, and now she was acting as if we were best friends. I told her I was done babysitting and that she shouldn't bring the kids over until invited. Emma left in tears. I felt awful, but also happy that I had finally established a clear boundary. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. The next day, my father called me. He was upset with me. He stated Emma had contacted him crying, accusing him of being nasty to her and the children. My father told me that I should apologize and continue to babysit Emma. He said that this is what families do for one another. I attempted to convey my side of the situation. I informed him about Emma taking advantage of me, repeatedly ruining my plans and never respecting my time or boundaries. But my father was not listening. He continued emphasizing that I should be more understanding and helpful. Then my father said something that deeply saddened me. He called me selfish and expressed disappointment in the person I had become. He told me that Linda and Emma were now my family, and I needed to accept it. He even mentioned how distant I had been since he married Linda, hinting that I still harbored a grudge. I was shocked. I told him they were his family, not mine, and that I was an adult capable of making my own decisions. I told him that I had my own life and obligations and I couldn't just drop everything to be Emma's on-call babysitter. This resulted in a major debate. My dad threatened to cut me off if I didn't apologize to Emma and resume babysitting. I felt hurt and enraged. I informed him I was self-sufficient and didn't need his money. I also suggested that if he wanted to cut me off over this, perhaps we weren't as close as I believed. My father ended the call by hanging up on me. Linda and other family members have since messaged me, accusing me of being unfair. They suggest that I be more empathetic of Emma's circumstances as a young mother in a new city. Some of my aunts have even called to say I'm pulling the family apart. Emma hasn't contacted me directly, but she has been writing on social media about how families should always be there for one another. She has been tweeting quotes about the value of sisters and how blood does not determine family. It appears like she is attempting to publicly guilt-trip me. I feel like I'm going mad. Am I truly in the wrong here? I don't think it's fair for Emma to expect me to be a free babysitter anytime she wants, and I don't think my father should threaten me about it. But I'm beginning to wonder whether I went too far in claiming Emma and Linda aren't my real family. Part of me feels guilty. Perhaps I could have been more patient with Emma. Perhaps I should have tried more to connect with her when we were younger. But another part of me is angry and resentful. I feel that my thoughts and boundaries are not being respected. I have always treasured my freedom. After my parents divorced, I learned to rely on myself. I worked hard in school, received a college scholarship, and have established a successful profession. I'm not used to having people rely on me in this way, and I'm not sure I want the responsibility. At the same time, I can't stop thinking about Liam and Ava. They're innocent in all of this, and I genuinely care about them. I don't want kids to feel rejected or undesired, but I also don't think it's good for them to have an aunt who dislikes babysitting them. I tried discussing this with some of my friends, but they seem divided. Some believe I'm being overly harsh and should try to work things out with Emma. Others believe that I'm correct in setting boundaries and Emma is entitled. I do not know what to do. Should I apologize? Should I stand my ground? I feel like this thing has spiraled out of control, and I'm not sure how to fix it. I don't want to lose my relationship with my father. But neither do I want to be taken advantage of. This scenario has caused me to question a lot about my family and myself. Am I really as selfish as my father claims? Have I been harboring bitterness for his remarriage without realizing it? Should I have worked more to develop a relationship with Emma over the years? I keep thinking about how things may have turned out differently if my mother was still present. She relocated across the nation after the divorce, and we don't communicate much. I wonder what she would say about all of this. I am at a loss. I believe that no matter what I do, someone will be upset with me. I want to do the right thing, but I don't know what that is anymore. Update 1. It's been almost 2 weeks since my last post, and things have only become more complicated. I'd like to thank everyone who responded and offered suggestions. It let me see things more clearly. After reading the comments, I decided to stand my ground. I did not apologize to Emma or begin babysitting again. This created some strained family relations. My father stopped communicating to me completely, and Emma continued to post passive-aggressive messages on social media about false family members and the value of being present for your nieces and nephews. The quiet from my father was especially difficult. We used to communicate at least once a week, but now there is nothing. I tried to convince myself that it was for the best and that I was creating good limits, but it still hurt. My stepmother, Linda, attempted to mediate the conflict. She contacted me several times, attempting to get me to reconcile with Emma and my father. She said she understood where I was coming from, but that family valued compromise. I appreciated her efforts, but I still felt as if everyone was rejecting my emotions. I immersed myself into my profession, taking on extra freelance projects to take my mind off the family problems. I also began going to the gym more frequently and took up a new hobby, painting. It was soothing to produce something lovely in the midst of my life's craziness. However, something unexpected occurred last week, which changed everything. I was in a neighborhood coffee shop working on a project when I overheard a familiar voice. It was Jake, Emma's husband. He was seated at a table with a woman I did not recognize. At first, I assumed it was a work colleague, but then I noticed Jake reach across the table and take the woman's hand. They spoke in quiet tones and looked at each other in a way that indicated this wasn't a nice meeting. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Jake was supposed to be at work, not having what appeared to be a love encounter with another woman. I sat there frozen, unsure what to do. Shall I confront him? Should I snap a photo as proof? In the end, I did not do either. I silently gathered my belongings and exited the coffee shop. I went home, my thoughts racing from what I'd just watched. I did not confront Jake. I wasn't sure whether I should tell Emma. Will she believe me? Our relationship was already fragile, and accusing her husband of adultery might only make matters worse. I chose to sit with the information for a day and consider what to do. The next evening, Emma called me. I almost didn't respond, assuming it was another attempt to guilt me into babysitting. But something prompted me to pick up. Emma was in tears and asked if she could come over. I consented, believing she might have learned about Jake. When she came, she was a complete wreck. Her eyes were red and puffy and she appeared to have not slept for days. But it was not about Jake at all. Emma admitted she had lied about running errands when she left the kids with me. She acknowledged seeing a therapist for postpartum depression and anxiety. Emma broke down while telling me her experience. She has struggled since Ava's birth, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate as a mother. She hadn't told anyone in the family because she felt humiliated and terrified of being judged. She left the kids with me during her therapy appointments. I was stunned. I felt a range of emotions: pity for Emma's situation, rage that she had deceived and taken advantage of me, and regret for how harshly I had judged her. I told Emma that, while I realized she was going through a difficult period, it was unacceptable for her to lie and dump her children on me without notice. We spoke for hours. Emma apologized for her conduct and for not being open about her issues. She promised to hire a proper babysitter for her sessions. I informed her that, while I couldn't be a regular babysitter, I would be happy to assist out on occasion if she gave me advance notice. As we spoke, I began to view Emma in a new light. I learned that despite her seemingly wonderful life, she struggled just like everyone else. It made me reflect on how little I understood about her life and how quickly I had judged her. Emma also discussed her emotions of loneliness after moving to the city. She stated she was thrilled to be closer to me, believing we could finally have the sisterly bond we had never had. She said she had pushed too hard and too quickly, and she apologized for not respecting my boundaries. I also conveyed my own feelings. I told her how I felt left out after Dad remarried and how I battled to fit into our new family dynamic. We chatted about our childhood, sharing recollections and opinions that we had never discussed before. Just as we were beginning to restore our relationship, I was faced with the decision of whether to inform Emma about what I observed with Jake. I debated the option, but in the end I chose to be honest with her. I gently informed her what I had seen in the coffee shop. Emma's reply was not what I expected. She didn't appear astonished or outraged. Instead, she became extremely silent before saying, "I know about Jake's meetings. It turns out that the woman Jake was meeting is his half-sister. Jake was adopted as a baby and had lately discovered his biological family. He had been meeting with his half-sister in secret since he was not ready to inform Emma or the rest of the family. He was concerned about how it may affect their family relationships, particularly with his adoptive parents. I was happy Jake was not cheating, but I was also frustrated by our family's concealment. I told Emma that all of this, her treatment, Jake's meetings, could have been avoided if everyone had simply been honest from the start. Emma agreed and said she'd speak with Jake about being more open with the family. She also pledged to be more open with me in the future. We concluded the evening on a brighter note than we had in weeks. The next day, I called my father. I informed him about Emma's troubles and how we had worked things out. I also told him that, while I was willing to have a relationship with Emma and occasionally help out with the kids, my limits needed to be respected. To my amazement, my father was understanding. He apologized for his reaction and acknowledged that he had put too much pressure on me. We promised to improve our communication and respect each other's boundaries more. We also talked about the past, including how his remarriage affected me and how we had grown apart over time. It was a challenging conversation, but it seemed like we were finally confronting topics we had been ignoring for too long. Things have calmed down, but I still feel like I'm walking on eggshells. There are numerous secrets and unsaid concerns in our family. I'm glad Emma and I were able to sort things out, but I have a feeling there will be more trouble. I'm trying to stay positive, but I'm also bracing myself for what might happen next. This entire experience has made me realize how little I knew about my family members. It's made me ponder what additional mysteries lie beneath the surface. For the time being, I'm working on gradually restoring my connections with Emma and my father. It's not easy, and there are still periods of tension, but it appears like we're headed in the right path. I'm discovering that family connections are complicated, and communication and honesty are essential. I'm also trying to strike a balance between being present for my family and preserving my own boundaries. It's a work in progress, but I'm hopeful that we can be family without compromising our distinct wants and identities. Update 2. It has been approximately a month since my last report and I wish I could say that things have improved, but they have not. In reality, things have gotten a lot worse. Remember how I started to feel like more drama was about to unfold? Well, I was correct, but I could not have foreseen what happened next. Emma called me last week, frantic. She was in tears and hardly intelligible. When I calmed her down, she informed me that she had received some horrible news. Jake hasn't simply met his half-sister. He's had an affair with her. Emma grew suspicious of Jake's numerous meetings and decided to follow him. One day, she noticed him meeting the woman at a hotel rather than the customary coffee shop. She approached him, and he confessed to the affair. He attempted to excuse it by claiming that he felt a connection with his half-sister that he had never had before, but Emma was understandably appalled and devastated. I was shocked. I felt bad for not pressing harder when I initially saw Jake with the woman. I attempted to console Emma as best I could over the phone, but she was distraught. She explained that she was leaving Jake and asked if she and the kids could stay with me for a bit. Despite our previous disagreements, I couldn't send her away in her time of need. I agreed to let them stay. Emma and the kids moved in with me the next day. It's been a tough transition. My flat isn't really designed for two young children, and Emma is still really emotional. She alternates between tears and aggressive outbursts. I'm trying to be supportive, but it's taking its toll on me. To make matters worse, Jake has been bugging Emma with continuous phone calls and messages. He's even popped up at my flat several times, causing havoc in the corridor. I had to threaten to contact the police to get him to go. It has been distressing for everyone, especially the children, who do not understand what is going on. Another explosive went off in the midst of the mayhem. My father contacted me, seeming anxious. He said he needed to tell me something important and asked if he could come over. When he arrived, he dropped a bombshell that shocked me to the core. It turns out Jake's half-sister is also my half-sister. My father admitted to having a brief romance with Jake's biological mother years ago, before meeting my stepmother. This woman gave birth to a daughter, who Jake has been having an affair with. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I heard. My father had held this secret for nearly 30 years. He stated he only found out recently when Jake's half-sister took a DNA test and it matched some of our family members. My father got in touch with her and learned the truth. I felt as if my entire universe was crumbling. Everything I believed I knew about my family was a lie. I was angry with my father for keeping this a secret, at Jake for betraying me, and at myself for failing to anticipate any of this. I haven't told Emma about the recent revelation yet. She's already coping with so much, and I'm worried this may push her over the brink. But I know I'm going to have to tell her someday. The previous several days have been a haze. I've been trying to keep things regular for the kids while simultaneously supporting Emma and dealing with my own thoughts about this new sister. I've taken some time off work to deal with everything, but I'm not sure how long I can do it. I'm at a loss on what to do next. My flat has become a refuge for my sister and her children, a safe haven from her cheating husband, and it now feels like the hub of a decades-long family scandal. I'm trying to keep everything together, but I feel like I'm drowning in secrets and lies. I'm not sure how our family will ever heal from this. The trust has been damaged, and I'm not sure it can be repaired. I'm thinking about going to therapy to deal with all of this, but for the time being, I'm just taking it day by day. I've tried to contact some friends for help, but it's difficult to explain the scenario without seeming like I'm making it up. How would you inform someone that your brother-in-law is having an affair with your hidden half-sister? It sounds like something from a horrible soap drama. I am also concerned about the long-term ramifications of all of this. What will happen to Emma and the children? Will Jake seek custody? And what about my half-sister? Should I try to reach her? Do I really want to know her? Given the circumstances, it's also worth considering how this may influence my relationship with my father. I'm upset that he kept this a secret for so long, but I understand that he was probably terrified and ashamed. Even so, knowing what he did makes it difficult to look at him in the same way. For the time being, my primary emphasis is on Emma and the children. Despite the volatility, I'm attempting to provide a stable atmosphere for them. It's not simple, but it seems like the proper thing to do. I'm also attempting to care for myself. I've started journaling to help me process my emotions, and I'm making an effort to do something I enjoy every day. Even if it's as simple as reading a book or going for a walk. I know I'll have to make some important decisions shortly about Emma's predicament, my connection with my father, and whether or not to contact my half-sister. But for now, I'm just trying to get through each day. If anyone has been through something similar and has any suggestions, I'd be grateful. This entire scenario is daunting, and I could use all of the help I can get. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and much has changed. After the shock of the discoveries subsided, we had to cope with the aftermath. I eventually told Emma that Jake's affair partner is our half-sister. She was devastated all over again, but it also provided her with the necessary closure. She sought for divorce and received a restraining order against Jake. The legal procedure has been messy, but Emma is sticking firm. Emma and her children remained with me for approximately a month before she found a tiny apartment of her own. She began working part-time at a local bookstore and is gradually reconstructing her life. This experience has actually brought us closer together. I occasionally help her with the kids, but only on my terms, and she respects my boundaries. We haven't contacted our recently discovered half-sister. We aren't ready for it yet, and I'm not sure we ever will be. The circumstances of her existence, as well as her acts with Jake, make it difficult to consider having a relationship with her. My relationship with my father has been strained. I was upset with him for hiding such a significant secret for so long. We've had several lengthy, painful discussions on trust, honesty, and the consequences of his decisions. He has been visiting a therapist to deal with his shame and learn how to regain trust with his family. It is a slow process, but we are making progress. I've started visiting a therapist to deal with all of my inner problems. It's helped me go through my feelings and set reasonable boundaries. I am learning that it is acceptable to prioritize my own mental health and well-being, even when family members are in crisis. One unanticipated result of all this is that I've reconnected with my mother. After everything came out, I contacted her because I needed someone to talk to who wasn't personally engaged in the situation. We've had some wonderful discussions and she's been a source of comfort throughout this. We're striving to restore our relationship and it's been great to have her back in my life. I've also made significant changes in my life. I decided to take a sabbatical and travel. I needed to go away from the family drama and rediscover myself. I'm writing this post from a modest cafe in Europe, where I've spent the last month. This distance has helped me gain perspective. I've come to learn that, while family is important, it is not everything. People who genuinely care about you will respect your boundaries and will not pressure you to sacrifice your ideals or well-being. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The lost trust will take a long time to recover, if at all. But right now, I'm focusing on myself, healing and growing. I'm learning to define family on my own terms and surround myself with people who bring happiness into my life. Emma and I communicate regularly. She's doing better now, focused on her children and her new career. The divorce proceedings are ongoing, but she's managing them with strength I didn't know she possessed. We are arranging a trip with the kids next summer, something to look forward to. Jake, as far as I know, has left the city. His affair with our half-sister ended horribly, and he's been attempting to reconcile with his adoptive family. I don't know all the specifics, and honestly, I don't want to. My father and I are progressively restoring our relationship. We talk once a week, and while things haven't returned to normal, they're improving. He's trying to be more open and honest, not just with me, but with everyone in the family. This entire event has taught me a great deal about resilience, forgiveness, and the value of honesty. It has also taught me that it is never too late to establish boundaries and prioritize your own well-being. Thank you to everyone who has followed my tale and offered advice along the way. Your support has meant more than you realize. If there's one thing I've taken away from this, it's that life may take you by surprise in unexpected ways. All we can do is strive to approach each day with honesty, courage, and self-respect.